Welcome to the Team IM latest developments in accounts payable automation webinar. My name is James Fowler. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Team IM, and I will host this webinar. I'll MC the event from start to finish. So let me continue down the list. I will introduce our speakers first and foremost. We'll run through the agenda very quickly, and then we will get into it. You'll be glad to know that we'll be keeping the slides to a minimum, but covering some important updates, and then we'll be getting through to a demonstration of some really interesting solutions towards the back end of the back half of the webinar. But yeah, so I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Team. You just heard from Mr. Mark Broom, who is the New Zealand Country Manager for Abby. Mark is going to take us through Abby's view of accounts payable automation, and Abby, if you don't know, one of the global market leaders in this space. So always great to hear what those guys are up to. We've got Sam Harp from the East Coast in the US. So Sam is VP of Customer Success at Team, as I say, in the States. And last but certainly not least, we've got Randy Sussner, who's a solution architect from Team. Randy's going to be driving the demo and taking us through the solution aspect of the webinar. So very quickly, the agenda is I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes about Team IM, who we are, and keep that nice and short. Sam is going to talk to us about accounts payable automation, more of an intro overview, bit of a level set, make sure we're all on the same page. I know from a few emails with some of the attendees that people are at very different stages of their journey with accounts payable automation. So Sam's going to just sort of set the level. Mark's going to pick up from Sam and talk about some of the latest developments in the market as a whole, as Abby are seeing them. He's going to walk us through a local customer case study, a customer journey, and Randy will pick up from there and then take us through the solution demonstration. So all things being well, we'll have 5 minutes, maybe slightly more at the end, for you to ask questions and for us to hopefully answer them. And then we'll wrap up, and we'll make this recording available to anybody who wants it. We'll send out a link, and of course we will be very happy indeed to answer any further questions or anything like that after the session. So let's keep going. So just 2 minutes on who are Team. So we've had a few different names that you may or may not have heard of. So Team Asperona in New Zealand, Team Informatics has been the global brand. We've recently united under a single global brand, single company name, which is Team IM. I am representing information management, which is our heritage. We've been working in the enterprise information management space for 20 plus years now. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, we're in 2020, and it occurred to me this morning that we always used to define, you know, who we are and the EIM aspect of that as, you know, we deal with the information, you know, not the data, the structured data, sort of easier to manage, easier to accumulate, and so on and so forth. Whereas the information, the wild variety of documents and stuff that humans create and humans consume, you know, we do that stuff, we do the hard stuff. But I think that definition sort of needs a bit of an update, because what we really do these days is we bring those two worlds together. I mean, information's great and everybody's got lots of it. But actually the currency that is data, if you will, is in that information. And that's it's very topical for what we're about to see today. You know, it's all about extracting the data points from the information so we can put, you know, documents into a workflow, a business process, so we can automate those business processes. That's what Team is about. That's what we've always been about. And it's very much true today as some of these technologies like automation are maturing and really delivering results for small, medium, and large organizations worldwide. So you know, it's a good place to be in 2020. You know, we see sort of customer satisfaction levels, you know, are certainly higher than they were sort of 15, 20 years ago. You know, the technologies are maturing. The best practice is something that we can actually hang our hat on. And certainly some of the vendors as well that we work with are also delivering some very exciting technology. So Abby, who we'll hear a bit more about, M-Files, one of our key partners around sort of document management, workflow, intelligent information management. Yeah, and just a bit of a company overview. So yeah, we've been around for 20 odd years now. We've got our HQ in the States. But we're a global organization, so Sydney, Wellington, UK is coming soon, once we get over this sort of global pandemic hump. There's about 75 of us worldwide. We're an organization, we have a lot of specialists. We're sort of light in sort of, we don't have a lot of, you know, sort of sales and marketing people. We have a lot of people who actually, you know, live and breathe this space. So that's us, and I think I'll keep this to a minimum.
Thank you so much, James, and good morning, everyone. So we'll jump right in this morning, and I wanted to talk just for a couple of minutes about why accounts payable is basically prime for automation. Talk a little bit about some of the highlights of where AP is today. Look at some of the business inefficiencies associated with accounts payable processing, and then also talk about the benefits. First of all, you know, take it from the experts. We look at McKinsey and Company. They did and performed a study that looked at the various areas of an organization in terms of its ability to be automated. And you can look at the top of the slide, general accounting operations, which includes accounts payable, ranked at a 77% ability to be fully automated. It can also lead an organization into, once accounts payable has been automated, to automate other areas of the organization as well, leveraging that investment for automation. In terms of the highlights of where we are today with accounts payable processing, unfortunately, around 90% of all invoices today are still processed manually. It's a very slow, cumbersome process. It has various errors that can occur during that process. In fact, we find only approximately 8% employ what we call a straight-through or happy path in terms of touchless invoice processing for PO-based invoices. That's typically very low. We also look at the invoice processing cost of $16 to $15 per invoice. I've seen some studies where that can actually be higher, particularly if an organization has a large number of invoices that are out of tolerance. For the organizations that do have some level of AP automation, it's surprising that only about 17% use intelligent data capture, which Abby will speak to in just a few minutes. So we're looking at miskeying of information, which further delays the processing of invoices, which can lead to unhappy vendors. And then looking at the average time today, it's approximately 30 days or longer from receipt to payment. So let's look at some of the inefficiencies in accounts payable as well as finance. First of all, we have the inefficiencies in invoice processing. We have organizations that look to take invoices that come in via the internet, via email, and actually take those and they print those out for either manual or perhaps some level of automation routing within a workflow. There's typically an abundance of errors, from miskeying of the information or the invoice when it actually comes into the organization. There's also a lack of visibility into the process. I mean, how many times has an organization received multiple calls for a vendor or from a vendor looking for payment? You need to be able to find, where is that invoices? At what point is it in the overall cycle? Has it been approved and has it been released for payment? In relation to that, we also have very long invoice cycle times. Sometimes those, as we mentioned earlier, can be 30 days or longer. You in turn leads to disgruntled suppliers. And you know, a byproduct of this is you want to be able to get the best possible pricing for your suppliers. If they're not getting paid on time, they're probably not going to be willing to give you their best price. From a finance perspective, particularly for a public company, finance looks at, you know, how efficiently and how well you actually pay your invoices. So there's a compliance risk associated. There's the overall cost associated with manual processing, and then a lack of visibility into the overall total liability of the organization, including cash flow. So let's look at some of the proven benefits of automating accounts payable. The first and the greatest is efficiency gain. We typically find that there's well over a 400% increase in the number of invoices that an employee can process in any given year. and 30% or more less time responding to inquiries. I've talked with different customers over the years that have had just a team of dedicated people to be able to respond to inquiries about invoices, not only from external vendors, but also from people within inside the organization. We see typically a great cost reduction and increased ROI with 91% lower invoice payment processing costs, as well as 12% fewer payments. You're also, because of the efficiencies gained, able to take advantage of early pay discounts as well as rebates from your respective suppliers. There's also increased accuracy in terms of the data entry with intelligent character recognition that can be utilized, which if it's miskeyed can actually cause invoices and the invoice to be delayed in terms of the payment. It's also a prime area that most organizations will look to begin their digital transformation, primarily because it is a low-hanging fruit and typically can look at an ROI of 12 months or less.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to the Team IM for inviting me to join the webinar today. Team IM are a valued global partner of Abby, and it's a real pleasure to be invited to speak with you all on this call today. So who is Abby? Look, we've really delighted to be celebrating our 31st year this year with Abby. I've been in the Abby business for coming up to 3.5 years and 22 years in the process automation space. Hence, we've got fantastic grey hair and wrinkles. But at Abby, we're a leader in the intelligent document processing markets, as recognised by Forrester Group. For 2 years running, we're in the top right-hand corner of the quadrant, and we're going to continue to build our growth in that area. What's truly unique about Abby and what we provide to our partners and customers is that we have all our own technology. Our unique value proposition is we create our own OCR, optical character recognition, ICR engines, optical mark recognition capability to truly be able to extract document, whether it's handwriting or physical machine print or optical marks on documents, to be able to process any type of documents in your business. We process in excess of 9.3 billion pages per year through our systems, so we know documents. To go alongside that, we also partner globally with some of the world's leading organizations and look to identify and establish partnerships with new technology as it comes on board. And in the presentation today and demonstration that Randy's going to provide, we will see Abby working in harmony with M-Files, and we have a global relationship with M-Files and a really secure handshake across our applications, as we do with many others. Now, within our business, we're seen as a digital intelligence company, and what does that mean? What that means for our partners and customers is that we look to elevate the digital intelligence of organizations to be able to rapidly understand, process, and then be able to execute that process using our content intelligence tools for doing activities like AP automation, which is a really good start for organization. Any organization looking to go down a transformation journey and what we call hyper automation, a great place to start is AP. There's a really qualifiable payback, creates a great foundation for automation in the business with the right tools, and truly enables continuous improvement across the business. In my experience, we've seen organizations start to fund their technology through an AP automation project and then look to address other opportunities in the business, such as remittance processing, sales order processing, vendor onboarding documents, AML checking, HR functions for onboarding new employees and offboarding them, etc. So with traditional tools, you only see a small snippet of your processes. So you don't have a complete understanding of how your processes are executed. And I'm not going to labor on our process intelligence tools, but it's pretty exciting. We did some great activity with our partners through the COVID lockdown periods, where we were help organizations working remotely be able to get logs out of their systems and replay and mine and tune in and magnify into their processes where there was waste and loss happening, and to be able to substantiate their business cases and put some measurability into their business case around time and cost. When you couple that with content intelligence, be able to extract and bring structure to semi and unstructured document, those two technologies working in harmony truly help organizations elevate their digital intelligence. So process intelligence, in our view, goes far beyond the typical processing mining tools that some of you may have engaged with. Gives you a really high-level view of the organization and really is used for dashboarding type activity. In our world, process intelligence goes to that next step. We were able to have a comprehensive support for any type of process, to be able to rapidly assess that process and have it booked in, look immediately at all the different ways that that process is being executed in a business, so good intelligent decisions can be made about how they want to configure their platform to deliver the automation in their business. Now that's really important to organizations, because every organization, for example, has an accounts payable department. And in my experience, I've never seen two accounts payable departments operate exactly the same way. Now, what I'm showing you here is a few screenshots of our process intelligence platform. We have 25 different analytical views that can be accessed from system generated data, not within months, weeks, or days, but measured in minutes, to allow organizations to have a rapid review of where they want to spend their time and magnify and hone in on those troublesome areas where they can start to lean out their processes. So the digital transformation journey in finance is really interesting. We go from part automation being foundational right through to leading. Excuse me, I'm not sure why my slides are flicking forward there, so bear with me, I'll just go back. Now, what I see in organizations that I talk to, I ask them if they're doing automated transformation in their AP departments. And sometimes I get an answer saying, yes, we are. And I say, that's fantastic. What are you doing? And the answer is, well, we're receiving PDFs via email. I go, that's great. Then what do you do with that electronically delivered documents? And I can tell you 9 times out of 10, the answer I get is, well, we take that document and we print it out. We then put a lovely rubber stamp on it. We sign it, add a date, and then we pass that document around the organization manually. And then when it gets back to finance, we scan it and attach it to the transaction in our finance system. Now, right away, we see opportunities for improvement, even if we start to just connect to their email system and automatically ingest those PDF files coming from suppliers, and then be able to execute what we call a document separation process using our technology without even doing any extraction. But to truly give yourself the biggest payback in your AP department or any process in your organization, the use of AI technology or our machine learning automation foundation truly, as you apply more of that technology, reduces the labor cost and payback and accelerates your processes in a business today. And on that point, if you want to learn more about our process intelligence tools, please feel free to reach out to the team IM guys that you work with, and I'd strongly encourage you to get a good view of that. But what's really powerful about our platforms is that our AI technology, and AI is a very loose term, in our world, that's all about deep machine learning. So having documents come into a platform and have our systems automatically understand and recognize the type of data we need to extract based on a classification that we've established on a document type. We have full convolutional neural networks, image visualization, so using image and text and changes in that text for the system to be able to continuously learn as more documents are fed through the system. We have a full NLP package, or natural language processing, to give understanding to documents. An example of that I'm working with an organization at the moment is around using our NLP technology to mine contracts and do full contract analytics. The last piece of the puzzle is we have deep integration with RPA or robotics platforms, and we partner with 7 of the top 9 RPA vendors in the market today. And I'm really seeing RPA as a really good tool to help with automation in finance. because sometimes one of the barriers that organizations have is, hey, I have this core system. It's been customized over years. Our support has diminished, and it becomes a really high risk integrating with that system. Using RPA tools has really unleashed digital transformation with that Abby technology and M-Files in the market today, and we're seeing organizations use us to enable. So FlexiCapture for invoices. What is this? That is our core platform that we use for automating the accounts payable process. And when we talk about our FlexiCapture for invoices platform, this is a pre-built configuration that is designed to read and understand invoices coming into an organization and to be able to automatically separate documents and work out whether a document is an invoice, a credit note, a statement, or a remittance advice, and be able to extract the right properties off that document to drive the right process. Now, in my world, what does this deliver to organizations? For me, and what I've seen and our customers and partners have experienced, and what Team IM have been delivering to their customers, is true time to value. We're talking about a project to automate the AP department, not being measured in years or months. We're talking about 2 to 3, 4, 5 weeks to get an automation of the AP department in place and operating. And from my experience, being that I'm a stalwart OCR geek, I like to play with technology quite heavy, and I'm able to sit in meetings with organisations who kind of go, that looks like magic. How did it read all that information on that invoice, including all the line items, and apply GL codes to those line items as required? And to help prove that point, I'm able to ingest some of their invoices on the fly and have a 90+% read rate of those invoices without any configuration. And the faster you can deliver time to value, the quicker organizations are starting to realize the benefits of the implementation and start to look at other opportunities in the business.
What are the systems that are involved in any AP automation scenario? First is the ERP. That's where your POs live, your vendors are created, the organization issues a purchase order out. It goes out, the customer will service that purchase order, send an invoice back. The invoice comes in, it enters into FlexiCapture. FlexiCapture consumes that, captures all the information on it, using what's called a non-fixed form processing project. That's what Mark kind of referred to before, where it can read almost any invoice that comes in, regardless of its format. We'll look at the use case or several use cases today, and none of the invoices are going to look the same. I mean, all invoices, we all know what they look like. They all have a date, a number, the line items, but the data is always a little bit different. And in an OCR world, some tools that matters. For FlexiCapture, the time and engineering that's in the invoice document definition is very strong, and with no coding, it will get that information out. And in the unlikely scenario that it doesn't, you can incorporate training into that, whether it's administrator-based training up front, or it's training as part of your scanning process. So then from the ERP, that data that it houses, that's important, right? The vendors, the purchase orders, etc. That information is going to be shared out or published out so that it can be consumed by both FlexiCapture and M-Files. The reason is when FlexiCapture receives that invoice, we want to be able to do line item matching, vendor lookups, things like that. And then when the invoice is done, it's processing in FlexiCapture and is exported from there into M-Files and enters M-Files AP approval process that we have defined. Having that other information gives us a real full picture of the invoice and all of its related objects. And we can use M-Files as 360-degree view to easily kind of traverse up and down the whole story around that invoice. All right, next slide, please. So use cases today, and the demo will start shortly. We're going to go through about a half dozen, and we're going to work our way from a little bit more on the happy path side, where there's less intervention needed on the FlexiCapture side. The first couple, we won't even open up a FlexiCapture verification station. The invoice is all good, meaning the PO, the math, everything is going to match up, and it's going to go right into M-Files and go into the M-Files approval process. And then as we get into the use cases more, we're going to have require more intervention on the verification side. So every time you do an AP automation solution, you want to, one of the goals is to kind of, automate things, minimize some intervention, your 80, 20, 90, 10, whatever the rule happens to be at your organization. And we definitely get to see some that just go all the way through and they're ready to be paid, whereas others are not. And others need intervention. We'll have a missing vendor, we'll have some mismatched line items, etc. All right, so I'm going to kind of go through or give us the lay of the land a little bit on what we're going to see today. So you're looking at an AWS virtual machine, Windows. We have SQL Server in the back end that's having that ERP data that we are going to read from both in FlexiCapture and in mFiles. But we're going to look at 3 systems in detail today. FlexiCapture, which is made up of multiple components. You have the server, which is the engine that does all the processing and does the export and does the validation. What you're looking at here, this little window we're going to leave up throughout the demo, is called the processing station. And it's really just a window into what's happening on the server. So we can see these tasks, hopefully all with green check marks, pop in and out as it's doing its work. Right now, you'll see stuff that's just popping in and out as we're monitoring, mailboxes and file shares. Next, we're going to look at an mFile system. And here, this is where the invoice is going to come in. Again, I keep kind of mentioning that data. It's important to note that there's 2 integration points with any ERP system. Again, it's that data front end so that you can give the full picture of the invoice, the vendors, etc. So we can actually take a look. We have some vendors loaded in here with a metadata card that looks like this. We can come in here and we can look at the purchase orders. So again, these are data objects that are already existing, kind of waiting for an invoice to come in and be related to these data elements. Also note that the data elements, mFiles is a very powerful, full functioning content repository. It manages both document and non-document data. When we export the invoices from FlexiCapture, we're going to be exporting multiple objects. An invoice object, each line item will be its own object, and then the actual document, an OCR, full text searchable PDF. So it's very powerful. Any data model that you have in your organization, an mFiles vault can manage it. And this vault is geared towards AP automation. When this invoice hits mFiles, we're going to send it to an mFiles workflow. In addition to its content capabilities, it has a fully functioning workflow engine. So we built the workflow engine. I just have an image of this process. So this is actually taken directly out of the mFiles admin utility. So you actually drag and drop as you build the workflow, much like any other kind of BPM style workflow. And this workflow may not, or certainly probably won't match what you guys would do in your organization, but it's just a good way to show and exercise a workflow instance in mFiles. What we're going to do is when the invoice comes in, it's going to hit something called invoice received. We're going to look at invoices coming in to the system in 3 different manners, 3 different scenarios. First, email, so an invoice attached to an email. Second is a scanning station, so loading paper in. And then third is a folder watch. So if the invoice happened to come in attached to an email, the whole purpose of this step is just to shoot a response back to the vendor, back to the sender of that invoice to say, hey, we got your invoice, here's a link, and that link will take us out to something called mConnect that we'll see, which is another system that reports on data contained in mFiles, yet it's external to mFiles. So it can be used for multiple use cases, things like reporting, collaboration with vendors, things where you want to share the data in mFiles, but don't necessarily want or can give them, access to the native mFiles interface. Once it's done there, it's going to pop forward to a status check. So reading data directly captured from the invoice, FlexiCapture is going to give it a status of rejected, valid, or exception. So if it's in rejected or exception, it's going to go into one of those queues. If it's valid, then it's going to pop forward to check receipt. Receipt's another one of those data objects that would live in your ERP system. So when you issue a PO, it's to get something, right? To get goods of some kind. Well, the receipt object would track the receiving of those goods. It may be a policy at your organization not to pay an invoice until you've actually received the goods. So this is a receipt check. So we're really just, again, synchronizing data from ERP. There's a receipt object in mFiles, and it's related to the PO. So we can, via automation in this workflow, when the invoice comes in, the invoice has a PO. Does that PO have a receipt? And we're just giving a message to the user saying, hey, the receipt exists, go confirm, or the receipt does not exist. Obviously, there's opportunities for automation or extending that workflow more as needed. Once it's done in check receipt, we pop forward to the amount check. Here we kind of, an arbitrary number of 50,000. If it's less than 50,000, it's going to auto approve to invoice approved. If it's more than 50, it stays. And that's just an arbitrary number. That's just purely part of the definition of the workflow. And then invoice approved, this is where it would end. And this is where that second integration with your ERP would happen. Here is where we would add the integration to push information back into your ERP system. And that looks different for different ERP systems. It might be a full invoice insertion, or it might be just a reference back to the invoice data, the invoice object in M files. So whatever that looks like, that's where we kind of complete that circle in that slide that we saw. All right, so let's get started. Again, I'm going to be wearing all hats. Again, we have a virtual machine here. We have M files. We have FlexiCapture. I have a Outlook with 2 mailboxes in here, and I have an email queued up that I'm going to send. So let me just go ahead and forward this to the email box that's being monitored by FlexiCapture. And I'll scroll up here. We'll look at the inbox. So here's the other mailbox. Here's the email, and we'll watch. One of these tasks comes in as this email gets processed. What's going to happen is it's going to take the email. It's going to detach the invoice, create a batch, process that invoice. And this is one of our more happy path type scenarios. This invoice is going to be fully OCR without any issue. All of the line items and the data on the invoice are going to validate and be, everything's going to pass, and it's going to go straight into M files. You can see it's actually exported. So in our processing station, we saw a task pop in and out of what it was doing, and now it's already into to M files. So I'm going to go over here into M files and have a view into all the invoices in the system. I'll click on that. Let me just do a refresh. You can see I'm sorted by date descending. So anything coming in with today's date up at the top of the list is our new invoices that we'll be adding as part of the demo. If I click here, you can see I'm in the workflow state, check receipt. I can right click, look at the history, and we can see how it went through the system, how it traversed through that workflow process. Well, the invoice received, this invoice did come in via an email. So we'll circle back and take a look at that email response and show the MConnect system. And if we look here too, I can expand this invoice and we can look at all the different data objects. Now you remember vendor Abby and this purchase order with this number, those are objects that were pre-existing in M files. So when this new invoice came in, the integration with FlexiCapture, it's smart enough to associate that. It found the vendor, actually FlexiCapture found the vendor off the paper, off the invoice, and then correctly associate that with the vendor object behind the scenes and then set that as a data attribute. And when it sent it over, it's automatically related. We have a line item here. We got one line item and we have the document. If I click on this document here, I can load the preview tab. Here is the invoice. So we haven't even looked at the invoice yet. This is the first time at it. And note it's OCR, so it's full text searchable in the M file system. M file is a very powerful search engine. And also note that it has a format. I mean, it's something that is a theme that I like to harp on a little bit, that all the invoices are going to look slightly different, yet FlexiCapture is going to be able to capture all that data. So like the date and the number, all that information that was captured here, or captured over FlexiCapture and then exported into M files, it works very well. If we scroll down here, we can look at our assignment description. We can say the receipt for this invoice purchase order is an M file. So if you remember that check receipt, it's like, okay, I'm going to go take a look and make sure that receipt's there. As as a user of the system, you know the object model. We know, okay, the receipt is part of the purchase order. So right in here in this same invoice, I can just traverse down, a handful of steps, and we can look at the receipt and say, yep, that receipt matches, the line item on the invoice. And we'll see other invoices with more than one line item as we extract those out and make them their own objects inside of M files. The last thing I want to show here is that, we actually capture the from address. So FlexiCapture can do that when it, reads an email, or processes an email as part of a batch. So we're saving that as a property. When it gets sent to M files, we're shooting off a response. So I come back over here and let's look at my inbox on the other email box. And again, as I'm wearing two hats, I got two emails. The second email is just the M files assignment as this user is assigned to this invoice in the step. If you look at the first one, it's a fairly simple email. It just gives a couple pieces of information about the invoice. This is totally configurable. We can add additional information. But then there's this link. If I click on this link, it's going to take me out to something called MConnect. MConnect's a Team IM product. It's a digital workplace that reports on information in the M files system using out-of-the-box APIs. It just gives it in a different format. It's really good for reporting, which we'll see at near the end of the demo. And in this case, it's good for collaboration. So now you can share with the vendor information about that invoice that came in. We have all the same invoice information that we saw in M-Files, and there's even a link to the PDF, so we can open up the invoice that was emailed in. And then we have the line items down here at the bottom as well. All right. So I'll move on to the second use case. The second use case is going to be another happy path. It's also going to be an invoice that does not have a purchase order. So having or not having a purchase order, or the absence of a purchase order, is not an error situation in FlexiCapture. However, it could be if you want to. FlexiCapture, in addition to its power in OCR, is also completely configurable. It's made up of dozens of rules, validation rules, script rules, logic rules, every one of which can be enabled, disabled, changed. You can add new rules. So it's extremely flexible. And we'll see a little bit of that as we look at the use cases and look at the form in the document definition. But here what we're going to do is, I don't have a network scanner in this virtual environment, so I'm going to simulate scanning by clicking on Add from Folder, grab the image, and import it in. Now it's creating a batch. Let's see, I'll click on this and make it a little bit bigger. And in here, again, we have another invoice. It looks different, similar. It's an invoice, sure, but it does look different than the last one. And at this stage, this is really, the user can rotate it. They can, despeckle it. They can do your standard, image level operations at this point. The main goal here is to make sure that this looks like the paper that you fed into the scanner. Okay, so once that's done, and they can just click on this green checkbox here, and this will load this up into the FlexiCapture server. And again, this, much like the last one, this is going to go up into the system, up into FlexiCapture server. It's going to process it, and it's going to shoot it right over into M-Files. And it looks like it's already done. So we'll go over to M-Files. Let me just refresh my invoice view. And here's the new invoice. This one's also in check receipt. Notice there's no purchase order here because it is a non-PO invoice. Also here, there's no purchase order, but all the information is correctly captured off that invoice. We're in the check receipt step. Our invoice is valid. This one's telling us there is no receipt, which makes sense since there's no PO. There can't be a receipt in this data model, but pretty straightforward. Okay, let's go to the next one. So we've had a couple. We've looked at a couple that have gone in and low user intervention. Let's look at one that's not necessarily the case, one that has some issues. In this case, too, we're going to look at the third ingestion method that I'll use for the rest of the demo, and this is folder watch. Much like email watch, it's watching a folder. If FlexiCapture server can get at it from a network perspective, it can watch it and load whatever comes in. A lot of clients that we see, they don't use the scanning station. They use a combination or one or the other between the mailbox monitoring and the folder monitoring. They don't have to change their existing scanning to just scan to a folder and then let FlexiCapture watch that and pull it right into the server. So you can see it's already gone here. I'm going to pop over here and we're going to look at the web verification station. So I already have a get task. On the next one, I'm going to show this one empty and watch it kind of pop in. It's pretty cool. But here is the task. So let's go ahead and open it. And what do we have here? This is called, again, the verification station within FlexiCapture. What it gives us is here we have a thumbnail. If there are multiple pages to this invoice, there would be multiple thumbnails. We have the invoice image itself. Again, 3 for 3, third invoice, similar but yet different. And then over here on the right, we have the implementation or the surfacing of the FlexiCapture for invoices document definition, the form. When it captures data, it's putting it here and it's allowing you to work with it. So this one, we stopped at the verification station. Usually you only stop at the verification station if there's something to be verified. In this case, it doesn't have a vendor. So we are in an exception status as vendor must be found in database. If I wanted, I could change this here. We're going to leave that alone because it correctly identified the issue and set it. And then here is the vendor field, and you can see there's the error. I could click on this and it would come right up to where the missing or the error occurred inside the form. And I can click on this find here, and this is going to load the list of vendors that exist in that database. Again, those ERP vendors that are published out and consumed by FlexiCapture and M-Files. And I can scroll down and I can see that, AA Apparel, but that does not show up in this list. I could start typing in, other ones, and they will show up, and I could choose one, but this vendor's not in there. FlexiCapture does have the ability to allow you to add a vendor, but the clients that we've worked in typically don't do this. A better practice is, instead of adding in here and having to implement a bidirectional replication between ERP and FlexiCapture, is instead leave it in an exception state, let it go over into M files, and M files could even be extended to start a business process that would get that vendor created. Once a vendor is created in the ERP system, it'll publish out automatically. It'll become available in M files, and you can easily edit the invoice object in M files, choose that vendor, and then push the invoice forward in its workflow cycle. Further, you could automate that too, right? As new vendors come in, you could have some logic in M files that looks for invoices in that exception queue and process them automatically. So we're going to leave that alone. Do want to come down and look at the rest of the data elements on this form. Clicking on it here will show where it found the value in from the image. So there's our invoice number, our invoice date, our invoice total. Here, if there were any other numbers, miscellaneous freight, they would show up. And here's our purchase order. So if I click here, it found our PO number here. And we have 3 line items, which it correctly OCR'd. See, everything is green. Green is good in FlexiCapture. If it's green, that means there's no errors. So it found it. Here's our order number. Here's our article. Article being the kind of the unique line item identifier for line items, whether they're in an invoice or in a purchase order. And our quantity is good, the unit price, and the total. In fact, we'd also get a mathematical error if this, 7 times 150 didn't add up. And I can also come up here and click on this details button, and this will go out again and read in that database and read the purchase order information as is defined in ERP. And behind the scenes, FlexiCapture out of the box, again, this is configurable. It uses all 5 of these elements to look up the purchase order line item and match it. If it matches, they all have to be the same. So again, number, article, quantity, unit price, and total. And in this case, they are all there. They're all correctly OCR'd and correctly matched against that purchase order in ERP. So I'm going to go ahead and click the button to push it into M files. This is telling me that we still have an error. That's that vendor, but we want to leave that error and work through that through exception processing in M files. So I'll complete the task. And here we'll let this run. You can see our task is now complete. We don't have no more tasks in the verification queue, and it's already exporting out. There it is. So I'll refresh, and here is our invoice. Again, we have all the information it could find. There's no vendor, so there's no vendor object to associate to, but it did find the purchase order. It did find the line items. We have a full text searchable PDF of the invoice. And if we come over here, we can see it's in the exception queue in our workflow. And if we come down here, in M files, you kind of go right down to the bottom, especially in AP automation, you look at the status, invoice status exception, the status reason of vendor must be found in database, and yep, it's not there. And then, please review this invoice. And my point earlier, we don't have this automated for the demo, but when this invoice's vendor, AA Apparel, becomes available, it's added to ERP and it's automatically published out, it's as easy as coming back here to this vendor field and picking that vendor as it comes in. And again, obviously opportunity for automation here as well. And then once the vendor's there, you update the status back to valid, push it forward in your workflow. Okay. Couple more. Let's go to the next use case. So this one is we've worked with several clients, and one of the things that's come up is that they have invoices that'll have some, but not all, of the line items from a purchase order. So multiple invoices to service a single purchase order. So what does that look like? So let's take a look at that. I got the first one in. We'll let that one load, and we'll take a look at that over here. And I wanted to show this as well. As it's going up to FlexiCapture, we can see the task kind of pop in and out. As soon as it's ready, this, like you just saw, is going to pop forward, populate with get task. It's very easy to tell, and it's real time. It's easy for a verifier to come in and see what work they have to do. So click on get task here. We have our invoice images over here, our invoice to the left. Here, the invoice status is valid, so there's no reason for a message. We did find the vendor. We have a number. Looks like we have an issue with the date. So it's got a red 5. What this means, whenever you see a red character in the form elements, it means that Abby has a question. It does not have 100% confidence on its OCR. So this needs verification. Truth be told, I manufactured this issue just so we could look at this invoice in this verification station. It actually worked just fine. I had to come over here and kind of manipulate the invoice. And the reason I did is I wanted to show this invoice here on the FlexiCapture side with the partial completion of the purchase order. So if I click on details for the PO, we can see there are 5 items, and there are 2 of them that were correctly, it's all green, so these are correctly OCR'd from the document. We can see on the 9557 and the 8087, 2 line items are serviced here. So pretty straightforward. At the end of the day, this invoice wouldn't have a date issue and it would just go straight into M-Files. So let's go ahead and click this and let that go into M-Files. While that's going, I'm going to go directly and I'm going to grab the next invoice, which has the rest of the line items for that purchase order, and paste that in. And then we'll watch as stuff gets processed. All right, looks like that one's done. This one hasn't been processed yet, so I'll come in and we'll refresh and look at the invoice. So here's the first one that we added. We have a vendor, we got a purchase order, we have a couple line items. Very straightforward. It's again a repetitive action. This is part of that automation that the gains you get as an organization. It all looks really good here in this invoice because it's all green and has line items. It may be a candidate for approval and even payment. Let's watch here. It looks like the next invoice has made it into the system. And the biggest difference that we want to show, the value that we're going to add when to multiple invoices coming in, because again, the second invoice had no intervention required on the FlexiCapture side, so that means it's all good. It doesn't really need anything. Well, what we wanted to be able to do is, we stack these invoices one on top of the other. I would bet a lot of times there's going to be some time passage between invoice 1 and invoice 2 as they come in to the system. So what we've added here is this additional invoices. And for the demo, we just plucked it in here, made the relationship. You can see it here. You can see it in M-Files 360-degree view over here. And it's just a way, an FYI to the user says, hey, this invoice is, there are other invoices related to the same purchase order that are servicing the same purchase order, so act accordingly. Again, automation could be added to verify that the line items contained in this invoice are in fact different. You're not double paying, but it's a good way to work with more than one invoice on a single purchase order. And I know we're rubbing up against time here, so there is one more that I would like to show. And the last one, let me grab the invoice and get it loaded so it starts processing. This last invoice is going to be one where the line items do not match. So very, very common occurrence that we've seen. You issue a purchase order as an organization, it goes out, you get your invoice back, and the information on the invoice, or I'm sorry, on the invoice coming in as it's captured, is not going to match what you defined as an organization in your purchase order. So how does FlexiCapture and M-Files deal with that? Okay, it's in there. Let's go ahead and get the task. Here's our invoice. Right off the top, it says status rejected, match on quantity unit extended. What does that mean? That's an ABI message. Again, we can change that if we want. We could drop down here and look at this, the window that shows us the errors. And we can see, data not found in database. Okay. So as we, forgive my screen size, a lot of times folks that do this full time have much larger screens than I do. We just kind of come down and look at this form. We can see the vendor is found, it's good, the number, the date, this total looks good. It found the purchase order. We can even load the purchase order items here. But as we come down, we can see there are 2 errors. It didn't find 2 items in 2 purchase order line items, or 2 line items on the invoice don't match corresponding line items in the PO. The OCR was not an issue. It certainly found it, and it OCR'd that correctly. We would actually have a second error if the math on this also didn't add up. But we can see here 6743. It's this one down here in the purchase order. It has a quantity of 120. This is 107.5 from the invoice. The unit price is off a little bit, so then the total is going to be off. The second one all looks good, but the third one 70, 62. Okay, well, what do we do? FlexiCapture does have the capability technically to change the value here. I could backspace and type in new data, but I'm not sure you want to do that because it would then mismatch with what the vendor actually sent on their invoice, what they're expecting to be paid for. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top And again, another candidate for automation, within FlexiCapture for invoices. And we're going to change this. The candidate being we could, this isn't really a rejected scenario. It's more of an exception scenario where the invoice line items do not match the PO. This could be automated as well, where if all the errors in the document are of the same type, and that is that, it didn't find the PO line items, then we could just automatically set this as its status and let the user verify it and basically click complete. So I'm just going to say okay there. Click the green checkbox to load it into FlexiCapture. Yes, I want to go ahead and complete the task. And we'll let that load. And we'll watch that invoice come in. Almost. There we go. Now it's in there. So I'll refresh. And you can see we are in the exception queue. And if we come down here, as the user who's assigned this task, they would say, okay, it's an exception. It says invoice line items do not match the PO. Okay, well, I know because of the data model that if I just start expanding stuff, there's my invoice, here's my purchase order. Purchase order has 3 line items, and here are the 3 line items for my invoice. And we named, we wrote this integration between between FlexiCapture and M-Files to name the line items with the relevant data points, so you don't have to click into each one of the metadata cards to see it. So that the article, quantity, price, total. So we can compare. Say, oh yeah, the first one, yep, that one's off. Second one is good. The third one is off. And while this is nice, and it definitely highlights the M-Files 360-degree view, if there were any more than 3, and even at 3, it gets to be a little bit, it's probably not the most ideal way to do this kind of comparison. So over at MConnect, we did add another page, much like that invoice that the invoice page that we'd send to the vendor is a comparison page. And we even put a link to it on the metadata card. So clicking on this takes us back out to M-Files. And here we have the invoice matched up with the purchase order, kind of, side by side, the high level information, the link to the invoice still. But then we took the line items for both and put them on the bottom and made them sorted to be guaranteed to be in the same order. And then it's really easy very quickly to see that there are mismatches, and you can make the proper decision for how this invoice should be processed. The last thing I'd like to show is, I'm just going to come over here and refresh this page. Hopefully it loads up quick, is the invoice dashboard. So our MConnect system has the ability to report on data, and one of the reports we built is this invoice view. It gives you a high-level overview of all the invoices in your M-Files system. We could filter them by vendor if we so chose, but it shows a handful of charts giving us invoices by status. If we hover over, we get a number. Very easy to tell kind of where things are in the system, where the invoices are in the workflow state. And then if there's, the invoices both in the rejected status and exception status, why? What is the reason for those in that status? And then a list of all the invoices down here at the bottom. Clicking on that loads the invoice page. Okay, thanks. That's the last thing I wanted to demo. I will turn it back over to you, James.
Great. Thank you very much, Randy. That's fantastic. You've covered a lot of ground there. And I know a lot of that will be resonating very much with some of the attendees who sort of live and breathe this world. So, given that we are 6 minutes past, I will just simply say thank you very much for attending. It's a genuine pleasure to have you all here. We've had fantastic numbers of people on the call today. Really appreciate you making the time for this. As I say, we would love to hear from you, thoughts, feedback, comments, any questions you may have around what you've seen today and how that would apply in your business. But for now, thanks again, and we'll leave it there. Have a great day.